the Epstein disclosures, there's too much to keep up with. There's so much to keep up with that there's almost too much to properly redact, to properly make public. I hadn't, I had heard that it had occurred, but, I was skeptical. Maybe it was sort of fake news. But it is, in fact, not only is there so much there that had previously, people were told didn't exist there. Now there's so much of it that needs to be disclosed that they're bungling the disclosure of the Epstein files by not properly redacting victims' names, by publishing nude photos of victims, by publishing banking information of alleged victims, to the point where the victims' lawyers have had to go to court to get the government to fix it. And this is one of those constructive criticisms where you don't get credit for doing your job properly, and you sure as hell deserve blame for bungling your one and only job at the moment. This is from ksat.com. Government says it's fixing redactions and Epstein-related files that may have had victim information. May have had? Washington, the Justice Department said Monday that it had withdrawn several thousand documents and, quote, media related to disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein after lawyers told a New York judge that the lives of nearly 100 victims had been turned upside down, end quote, by sloppy redactions in the government's latest records. Do you remember the first time? I'm going to break this out. I'm not being an ass for the sake of being an ass. You want this administration to succeed. The Trump administration, you see that right there? That's not for show. You see that hat? That's not for show. Those shoes up there, I got those to support the Trump administration, to support Trump. I have been a vocal supporter and continue to be of Trump. Supporting someone means not egging them on or letting mistakes be made that compromise their likelihood for success. I mean, I'll say it over and over again. You are not supporting someone if you don't hold them to a standard of success. This is the second time they've bungled the redactions in the disclosures. Set aside the entire nonsense about how there was nothing to disclose, and if you're still pushing this, you're not a true Trump supporter, and you get all the sycophants who had their little NPC chip replaced. I won't name names, but you know damn well who they are. The ones who a year ago were saying Epstein files, Epstein files, Epstein files. Come March, you just switch a little button in their small little brains, and they go, who cares about the Epstein files? Move on. Nothing to see here. No disclosures. Phase 1 is embarrassing all of these influencers, actual independent journalists. Phase 2 is nothing. I'm going to bring this up right now. What's his name? Sean Davis, who was complimenting or thanking Dan for referencing his email from, when was this email from? Not email, sorry, tweet. Was from July 13, 2025. Mike Davis at the time had this to say: anyone who rapes kids deserves the death penalty. I think we all agree on that. Here's the problem with the Epstein mess. The FBI doesn't have the evidence many thought it did. Well, that didn't age very well. It may not have had the evidence, and in which case we're playing legal semantics games. It had documentation that could have been disclosed that they actually fought not to disclose while saying it didn't exist. There are not tapes with powerful men raping kids. Well, we'll take your word for that, because I don't know how you would even communicate that. There is not a list. Again, we're playing legalese here. There's not a list. There's just, we know what we mean by the Epstein list. We don't mean a Rolodex. We mean a bundle of information that identifies, like Swedish UNCHR representatives who were going to Epstein's sex island. That's what we meant by a list. Oh, I'm sorry. It was like, goes back to my days of practicing law, where I was, you asked for communication of documents in discovery. Please communicate to me any and all emails, written correspondence in any form whatsoever between you and you, between X and Y and Z dates. I asked the lawyer for any and all communications between X and Y, between A and B dates, in email, letter, fax, any form whatsoever, text message, etc., etc. I get a bunch of documents back. Woohoo! I got the documents. I find out 3 months, a couple months later, that one of the emails that was forwarded to me had the initial email to which it was replying cut off. And that initial email, I've told this story before, indicated a date of knowledge of alleged copyright infringement that would have precluded the action in the first place. And then I took this to court. And I said, sanction that fucker of a lawyer. He deliberately cut off what he knew was a material element that established the date of knowledge from an email thread that I had asked for. And the lawyer said, you asked for the emails. You didn't ask for the original emails to which they were replies. And you know what happened? Nothing. The judge said, all right, well, you have it now, so make your arguments. Holy hell. This is legalese crap. When we said list, we didn't mean a to-do list. We didn't mean a handwritten, here are the list of my pedophile clients that I traffic children to for favors. And the file is largely unreleasable for many reasons, including grand jury, court records under seal, CP, child pornography. I don't want anyone thinking I'm censoring for self-censorship. Protection of victims. Protection of victims is number 4. Unsubstantiated, even double or triple hearsay. Bogus claims. Well, the bogus claims were the ones against Trump by unhinged nutbags who the FBI subsequently determined were unhinged nutbags. Does anyone really believe that Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, or Dan Bongino would cover up for the likes of Bill Clinton or Bill Gates? Irrelevant question. What was disclosed now was clearly damaging to Bill Gates, and it was covered up. So nobody cares about motivation. The outcome is that after Thomas Massie, who had war declared on him, to pass a law to compel the disclosure of the documents, which were disclosed. So all of these grand jury materials, court records under seal, whatever they might have applied to that might not have been releasable, that may not have been released, other stuff was released after they fought tooth and nail against Massie and Ro Khanna, and it did embarrass Bill Gates. So whether or not their intention was to protect Bill Gates, because no, I don't think at least one of these people, I don't think Dan Bongino in a million years would ever protect Bill Clinton or Bill Gates from these types of accusations. Kash Patel, I'm not so sure anymore. Pam Bondi, there might be other overriding interests. But whether or not they ever would deliberately cover up files, they did, in fact, and only under compulsion of a law that was passed, and tardily so, release information that, holy mother mercy, it embarrassed Bill Gates. Contracting an STD from sex with a hooker and then spiking his wife's drink so that she doesn't contract the STD. I don't care why they did it. It was done, and it was covering up information that embarrassed the living shit out of Bill Gates. How that man still has a position or any role of influence in society is beyond me. What am I? I'm just a nutbag screaming at a Insta camera in a sunny Florida afternoon where it's finally reached temperature where the iguanas are thawing out. The Trump Justice Department wanted to be fully transparent, but it can't for the reasons above. This is a case of no good deed goes unpunished. Okay, this is the line that I took issue with. The Trump department wanted to be fully transparent, but it can't for the reasons above. There are two interpretations to this statement. One is more favorable than the other. That the Trump Justice Department, Bondies, wanted to be fully transparent, but couldn't, so they lied, but they had a good reason. They were deliberately not transparent, but they had a good reason. That's one more negative inference. And the other one, which would be favorable, is they wanted to release everything, but they couldn't because of the reasons on the prior page. Well, the reality is, they fought a bill that would have allowed for the lawful disclosure and thus either bypassed the prior alleged restrictions or at least allowed for the release of the information that would not be barred by these. And they've released new information. It's damning as hell. And now we're seeing that there really was no good reason not to do it because it didn't incriminate Trump at all. It actually exonerated him for the reasons I went over the other day. That clip appeared on Vince's show. So that explanation makes no sense. But they've bungled it again in a way that's going to compromise the administration, make them look like, I'll get to the way they phrased it here. The exposed materials included nude photos showing faces of potential victims as well as names, email addresses, and other identifying information. Remember Sean Davis's reason we can't release it because it'll potentially expose the victims. Well, you were supposed to release it to redact that information. And now you didn't even do that. And that's after the first bungled redactions. Remember when they blacked out the information, but you could save it and open it in Adobe or whatever and remove the blacked out so you could see what was blacked out? And I said at the time, that would be one hell of a funny way of looking like you're trying to do your job while allowing for the disclosure of the information that you want to disclose. But the bottom line is, A, it could be sanctionable in law, and B, it makes you look like bungling idiots. And it happens again. In a letter to the New York judges overseeing the sex trafficking cases brought by Epstein and confidant Ghislaine Maxwell. You notice how they always have to say disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein and confidant Ghislaine Maxwell. U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton wrote that the department had taken down nearly all materials identified by victims and lawyers and a substantial number of documents identified independently by the government. Clayton said the department has, quote, revised its protocols for addressing flagging documents after victims and their lawyers requested changes. Documents are probably pulled down and flagged, then evaluation before a redacted version of the document can be reposted. Once it's on the internet, it's out there forever. You're never getting it back. You could try to go and put a Band-Aid on the busted fire hose. The document is out there. Once it's on the internet, it's out there forever. You cannot, as one of our favorite lawyers said, you cannot put the shit back in the horse. You cannot put the toothpaste back in the thing. Emily Baker, another great channel to watch. 2 lawyers for Epstein's victims wrote the court Sunday seeking immediate judicial intervention because of what they described, failure to redact. 8 women who identify as Epstein victims added comments to the letter to Richard Berman. One wrote that the records release was, quote, life-threatening. Another said she'd gotten death threats after 51 entries included her private banking information, forced her to shut down her credit card accounts. Quote, this is the quote, sound bites and quotes. There's no conceivable degree of institutional incompetence sufficient to explain the scale, consistency, and persistence of the failures that occurred, particularly when the sole task ordered by the court and repeatedly emphasized by DOJ was simple: redact known victim names before publication, the lawyer said. We don't need to go into the rest of this. I'll give you the link anyhow. I said, hypothetically, remember, you float the idea. If the goal were to embarrass people within the administration, within the Trump administration, to discredit the progress that the Trump administration has made, if you wanted to sabotage them and look like you were trying to do your job at the same time, what would you do differently? So they have now bungled the disclosure after denying that there was any, additional info to disclose in the first place. And what do we find out in this additional disclosure? Well, we find out that Michael Wolff, who now might be getting sued by Donald Trump, you'd presume that Trump himself would want to have known about Michael Wolff attempting to suborn blackmail material from Jeffrey Epstein for the purposes of blackmailing Trump. You'd presume Trump would want to know that. The media is running with Trump's name appears thousands of times in the documents. True. Not in any meaningful way. In fact, only in an exculpatory way. But if you have incompetent buffoons, or worse still, people who are trying to sabotage Trump to convince him not to disclose this by saying, your name appears in it 5,000 times. Well, that's what you would say. That's what the media would say. His name appears in it 5,000. Irrelevant. His name appears in it because Michael Wolff, I say the Wolf in the White House. That's damn good, by the way. If I ever write a book, I'm going to call it Wolf in the White House, about Michael Wolff biography. Michael Wolff colluding with Epstein to try to get blackmail extortion material on Donald Trump. Oh yeah, but his name was mentioned 5 times in that email. Whoop-de-frickin-do. So what else was released in this? This is going to blow your freaking minds. This is a UN representative. What's her name again? Joanna Rubinstein. Swedish UN official resigns after contact with Epstein revealed. Chair of Sweden for UNHCR, the United Nations Health and some Human Care Resource. I don't know exactly what the CHCR steps. It's for the refugees. That's what it is. It's for refugees. Steps down after newly unsealed documents show she visited late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. She visited him. By the way, her statement is so damning. Not only after he had pleaded guilty and was known to be a sex offender, a pedophile sex offender, after her knowledge of it. Istanbul. Joanna Rubinstein, chair of the Sweden for UNHCR, resigned from her post on Monday after newly unsealed documents. Oh, but there was nothing new. There's nobody to investigate. Isn't that what Kash Patel said at one point? After newly unsealed documents revealed that she had visited late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein on his private island. Quote, Joanna chose to leave her assignment after what appeared in the media over the weekend. This was not something that the organization or the board was previously aware of. Well, I'm going to take your fucking word for it. You lying scumbags. We'll get back to the UN and their sex trafficking in a bit. Said Daniel Axelsson, press officer for the Swedish UNHCR. In 2012, Rubinstein visited Epstein's private island with her family and later thanked him in an email describing the stay in positive terms. At the time of the visit, Epstein had already been convicted of sex crimes. Listen to this. She said this, allegedly. Unless this is a false publication. Quote, I was aware of the verdict at the time of the visit. What has subsequently emerged about the extent of the abuse is appalling and something I strongly distance myself from, Rubenstein told. I was aware that he sexually abused children, but I wasn't aware of the extent of it. Just a little bit of sexual abuse of children, I would be prepared to wine and dine with and take money from. I wasn't aware it was so bad. Can you believe that's her actual excuse that she is reported to have given? I knew about it. But I didn't know how bad his child rape was. I didn't know how bad his solicitation of prostitution from a minor was. Bullshit, you didn't know that. And even if you didn't, if that's your judgment, you are one hell of a scumbag as well. The U.S. Justice Department recently released a trove of 3 million pages, 2,000 videos, 180,000 images related to Epstein under the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which was signed into law by U.S. President Donald Trump on November 19th. He did the right thing, Trump. Took a little pressure, took a little pushback from his loyal base, not his yes man, yay-sayer, idiot base. From his sincere people who want him, need him to succeed. Yes, he actually reversed track from his own mistake, and we can forgive people for mistakes. We are all human. We are all sinners. We are all prone to make mistakes. He signed it into law, and people look like a bunch of idiots right now. Not the least of which are all of the people who said, release the files, only to then say, don't release the files. I've got my new marching orders, and are now eating crow. The files include photos of prominent figures, grand jury transcripts, and investigative records. Well, Sean Davis's tweet on it didn't age very well. Epstein was found dead by suicide, allegedly, while awaiting trial. Now, when I say that I have reason to suspect that Joanna Rubenstein, who knew of Jeffrey Epstein's criminal, pedophile predilections, it might not be as innocent as she says. Like, do you guys remember the stories of the UN and child sex trafficking? Like, you guys know this, right? The UN has a nasty history of, and whether or not it's directly related to Epstein, whether or not Epstein was benefiting directly or indirectly from sex trafficking that occurred under the UN's watchful eye, I'm allowed to think so under the circumstances. Just by way of example. Later, thank you, close advertisement. AP exclusive. What year is this from? 2017. AP exclusive. UN child sex ring left victims, but no arrests. Oh my goodness, I didn't actually get all the way through this article because I didn't. Let me see here. Let's just. Oh, Rubenstein's name doesn't show up in it. Okay, fine. Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Oh, who was heavily involved in Haiti rebuilding? Who was alleged to be involved in human trafficking in Haiti? Oh, yeah, that's right. Bill Clinton. Hillary Clinton. The Clinton Foundation. Port-au-Prince, Haiti. In the ruins of a tropical hideaway where jet setters once sipped rum under the Caribbean sun, the abandoned children tried to make a life for themselves. They begged and scavenged for food, but they could never scrape it together enough to beat the hunger until the UN peacekeepers moved in a few blocks away. The men who came from a faraway place and spoke a strange language offered the Haitian children cookies and other snacks. Sometimes they gave them a few dollars, but the price was high. The Sri Lankan peacekeepers wanted sex from girls and boys as young as 12. Yeah. This is the same UN that Rubenstein. She's in the Swedish part. Different branches. People, you can't paint the entire UN in one broad brushstroke. They do a lot of good work across the country. That's the same UN who has been involved in child sex trafficking and child rape. And this woman was just fraternizing with a human sex trafficker and child rapist, allegedly. I don't even know if that's alleged, if we have to say allegedly anymore. And these were the documents that they didn't release because they couldn't release them, and they thought the reason that would compel them to release them, and then when they released them, they screwed everything up for many of the victims, allegedly. And we were the bad guys for saying this is a big unforced error. Release it. Nothing in there is going to compromise Trump. If it were in there, it would have been out already. Morons, under 4 years of Biden's corrupt DOJ. If there were anything in there that could have legitimately bona fide sunk Trump, they would have released it. They would have leaked it. It would have gotten out already. But what we're noticing is absolutely stunning coming out of this. Now, Mike Benz did a breakdown. I'm not going through the whole thing because he was just on Rogan, and I'm going to listen to that podcast on my next jog. Put out a tweet, and he says in his tweet, when is this from? Yesterday, February 2nd. I'm utterly blown away by this new audio in the Epstein files. It shows the secret conversation you fear every high-level government official might have with an outside fixer to hook them up the moment they, quote, leave government to enter the private sector. Here, Jeffrey Epstein teaches Ehud Barak, former Israeli prime minister, and by the way, I've gone into depth about Ehud meeting up with Epstein 19 times after he was a known sex offender to take millions of dollars from him for his online streaming platform that would also geolocate. He didn't know. It's not like Israeli intelligence would do some due diligence on someone who you're taking $2 million from and going to their private residence. That's crazy, Viva. While he was still Minister of Defense in Israel, but on his way out, how to make millions of dollars in the private sector by first compiling a list of people who owe him favors from his 40 years in government service. Epstein then told Ehud Barak to pursue Peter Thiel, whose name, at that point, Ehud Barak did not even know how to spell, to accompany Palantir, which they also didn't know how to spell, which existence Ehud Barak had never heard of. Credit to Ryan Grimm, whose clip I first saw to look for this. I used Grok to backtrace the source link from the audio. Ryan assesses this meeting took place in February 2013, which seems to line up with the audio saying Ehud Barak is about 71 at the time. Now, I just had one section. It goes into the beginning, and go watch the entire thing. I'll give you the link, but I just wanted to play one highlight right here. This is actual Jeffrey Epstein talking with actual Ehud Barak.
I'm going to keep playing.
This person owes me. Yeah, okay. And so you got to work it backwards and say, here is my, instead of thinking about what the opportunities are first, because right now you're focused on opportunities. Yeah. I need you to focus on your personal balance sheet in terms of competences. What's your real strengths? What's the liability? One of the liabilities is you're 71 years old, so you can't be in a business. It takes 20 years to make money. Yeah. You have to make money in the next 3 years. So people, competence, things. So I talked to Ian yesterday. I asked him to come. Yeah. He flew in from London. He's great for an hour.
What was his impression from the...
So same thing. Because he's very connected to Samsung. Very. Who? Samsung. Korean. Samsung. Yes. Yeah. Very. Yeah. They pay him $3 million a year.
Just to make PR.
Yes.
Just to make PR.
Companies like that now. Okay. So he said there's this company called Lookout. He said he mentioned it to you. LOOKOUT. Yep. He thinks they'll pay you a couple of $1 million to be on the board.
Yeah. That would be good.
I understood.
Oh yeah, that would be good. A couple $1 million to be on a board would be good. No shit, Sherlock. Sort of like $50,000 a month to sit on a board would be good. It would shield the company from potential investigations. That's what you witness right there. Is, like I always say, corruption is not someone showing up with a briefcase full of cash and saying, this is what you have to do, and here's the cash. It's the wink, wink, nudge, nudge of corruption. What they're discussing right there is the political, you grease my back, I grease yours, or your personal balance sheet. Well, let's just see how you go about getting that personal balance sheet, by hook or by crook. And it's shocking. It's nothing that we didn't already know, but it's new. And it's new, and it highlights that the entire handling of the Epstein debacle has been a massive unforced error that at the end of the day, I think will still be net positive for Trump. And maybe some people out there who are into the whole 4D, 5D chess say, oh, he had to do this to release it now so that it fully sinks in and has massive impact for the midterms, which by all accounts, everybody is projecting Democrats to win and Republicans to lose. No. There's sacrifices in chess, and you do it for strategic advantage or for the knockout checkmate. You don't just give up pawns. You don't trade a bishop for a pawn and say, well, it's a strategic sacrifice. You just don't see it yet. And then 4D chess later, you're checkmated or resigning. And so that's the latest of what's coming out of the files. It's mind-blowing. And you couple all of this together with what we know, and it is disgustingly fishy what the hell is going on. Epstein fraternizing with institutions that you know were involved in child sex trafficking. And the tweet on it, Swedish UN official Joanna Rubinstein resigns after Epstein disclosures show she visited Sex Island after knowing he was a convicted sex offender. Why would a Swedish UN official serving as the chair of the fundraising foundation for the UN Refugee Agency have anything to do with sex offender Epstein? Let alone why she would visit his pedo sex island. You know why? It makes perfect sense. If you're a pedo, sex offender looking to traffic children for sex, where do you look? You look for war zones and you look for disaster zones. You look for children who have been separated from their parents by war, by environmental crisis, or by crossing a border, human trafficking. And you have those children to sex traffic. And if you think that wasn't at least part of the reason why the Biden administration opened up the border and lost 300,000 kids, which under this FBI, they have found tens of thousands. If you thought that wasn't one of the reasons why, then you, sir, not only lack a creative imagination, you lack basic critical thinking. And that's that.